Hey, this is Karen Coach's Corner Chats, and on the episode today, I have Sean Bray. Sean, where are you at, and what are you up to?
Um, just coaching at Fenwick. Just got done with my second season at Bishop Fenwick on the boys' side, and coaching club at Lakota FC in Westchester. I have the '05 boys, and I work. My day job is working down at Lakota West. I work with special ed kids with learning disabilities. So I'm around kids all day. So.
What were some of your biggest takeaways? Because I just finished year two.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that you feel like you learned or maybe did better the second time around?
Boy, last year was very, very challenging, with all the COVID restriction things you can and you can't do. And this year I thought it was a little better. We could do more stuff, especially the off-field stuff like team building and, just hanging out together and getting, guys getting to know each other and, developing those relationships with each other. And I think that really helped us out on the field, because we were just last year it was practice and games, and that was it. So we had cookouts this year, and we did an overnight camp out, and we were able to work a couple FC Cincinnati games down there as fundraisers, and the guys got to hang out doing that. And the second game that we went to, the guys we got to watch FC Cincinnati and when they played Colorado. So the guys enjoyed that. So just it's little things like that. So I think that helped. I thought our team was a lot closer this year, and just they knew how we wanted them to play, and I think they were just more comfortable, and they had a better understanding of what the expectations of them were. So I'd say that's probably the two biggest things right there.
I completely agree with the ability to now actually be able to do stuff with them, because last year there were so many restrictions on. You had to keep in pods, and they had to do all that,
Yes.
checking temperatures and checking off the checklist. The one thing I know, because I follow you on Twitter and stuff, is you do a lot of like man of the match and things like that.
Yeah.
Is that kind of a continuation of the team building and what have you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the guys, like the man of the match, is voted on by the players, and so just sometimes we've had different guys win it 2 or 3 times in a season, and sometimes it's one guy will win it once or twice. But the guys, they it's something they get into, is that we'll have our post-game talk and, hey, what we did well, or this is the next game we have and this is what we need to get ready for. And then we'll hey, who do you guys think the man of the match is? And sometimes it's unanimous, and other times they'll have 2 or 3 different guys, but it's completely up to the players and what who they decide, and that's who we put on. And the guys like to see their get that positive feedback, because the likes and stuff from their family and friends and stuff, they're like, oh, so it's something simple that we did. And then this year we added every time we had a shutout, they got donuts. So it started with just the varsity guys, and then the JV guys, they're like, hey, can we do that? And then so we were buying donuts for both the varsity and JV guys, and we're like, oh my gosh, we have to buy donuts every game. We're like, we're all of our money we make coaching's going to donuts, which you don't mind because the kids are doing well. But so just little things like that. It's simple, but the kids get into it, and something they look forward to.
What brought you to Fenwick in the first place, and this opportunity to coach?
I started off in Indianapolis, so kind of my coaching career in a nutshell. I started off coaching high school where I went to high school, around Colley High School on the south side, which is very, very similar to Fenwick. It's a little bit bigger than Fenwick, but Catholic school and different things like that. So I went from high school to college and then back to high school. And I've always coached club, and my wife, she's a lot smarter than I am. I was just smart enough to marry her. So she's an engineer, and her job brought her here. So it got us closer to family. So because I'm from Indianapolis and she's from Oldenburg, so because we were living in Southeast Ohio, so it was like 3 and 4 hours if we wanted to go visit family. And now it's an hour, 2 hours. So really, that's how we ended up here. And then my oldest son, Bruce, who plays on our team, he goes to school at Fenwick. And then a friend of mine that I know from coaching club, she was a girls coach last year, and she got hired as a girls coach. And she said, hey, I ran into her at a scheduling meeting for Buckeye Premier, and she's like, hey, Fenwick's looking for a boys coach. Are you interested? I'm like, I didn't even know they were looking. She's like, I'm going to tell them that you're going to apply. And so that was like on a Sunday. I think I emailed the AD like on Monday. I sent my stuff in like either Monday night or Tuesday. met with them, I think that week, and and then got to meet with the players and stuff. So it was all really kind of quick, just like in a week or two. And then, how everything was. We met in March. We had our parent meeting in March, and then everything got shut down after that. Like the kids weren't in school, so we did a lot of stuff over Zoom and different things. So, and you go into June and you're like, well, we hope we have a season. And so, like you said, the guys are training in pods, and you got to keep them, limited to what you can do. And so it was just a different experience. I've never gone through anything like that. But like I said, it was really just my wife's job that brought us to this area. So, and then, my oldest son, Bruce, that's where he goes to school. And I asked him, I said, once I got hired, I said, hey, Bruce, I said, I'm going to be, because I coached him a couple of years in club. And I said, I'm going to be your coach for the next 4 years. I said, is that good or bad? And he said, I'll let you know in 4 years. So we'll see what he says.
It's interesting, some of the parallels, because my son was a senior last year, and got to coach. So I was going to ask you, what has that dynamic been for you? Do you find it hard to turn off coach when you get home, or you get in the car, or have you found a good balance?
Yeah, some days it is, like, because my dad, when I coached, my dad was always one of the assistant coaches. When I played in high school, he was one of the assistant coaches. So it's kind of neat to have that experience that I had with my dad, now with my kids, because they both play soccer. My youngest son will be a freshman next year. But like, I've coached him, like I said, I coached him a couple of years in club before I coached him in high school. And kind of the same deal that my dad had with me. He said, when we're at soccer, he said, I'm not your dad. He said, I'm the coach. And then he's like, once the game's over, or, practice is over, he said, then I'm back to being your dad. And I said, okay. And so that's kind of the same deal that I have with Bruce. And, I told him that, and I said, I'm not your dad at practice. And he said, well, who are you? And this is like when he was in junior high. And I said, I'm your coach. He said, okay. And then, so he's very type A, very analytical. And he's like, okay. And then, so it's funny, the kids will give me, they're like, hey, why don't you call your dad? Why do you call your dad coach? He's like, that's who he is. He's the coach. You're like, well, he's your dad. And he's like, not here. He's not. So it's like, sometimes, him and I will chat on the way home, and he's like, are you talking to me as my coach or as my dad? I'm like, I'm your dad right now. So sometimes, it kind of, it tries to overlap a little bit, but we try to keep it separate as much as we can. So,
do you find that he is a valuable resource, being that he's kind of in the mix, and he kind of, maybe he picks up on vibes of what's going on, kind of, that you might miss as standing on the sideline?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, because he's a sophomore, and sometimes he'll ask me, he's like, hey, can I talk to you as a player? And I'm like, yeah. And then he'll tell me stuff, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, I just wanted you to know. And then, he goes about his business. But yeah, so it's good and stuff, because like his friends are obviously on the team and stuff, and they're like, hey, tell us something about Bruce. So they always, how kids are, and so it's funny. It's good. Everybody's close, and you give each other a hard time, but and stuff. But it's fun. So he is a good resource. And he's like, well, the guys are, this is what we're thinking, or what about this? And so sometimes they have, just like anybody. I'll always listen. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't agree, but I always listen to him. So, and he knows that him, not just him, but all my players, they know that they can come and talk to me or any of the other coaches, anytime they need to. So,
what was you said you started out coaching in near Indy. What was that? What was that first coaching experience for you?
Oh I had like my summer job, because my dad did construction. And then, so when I was in college, I worked for the same company he did. I worked as a laborer. So you get all the jobs that nobody else wants. we were actually working at Roncalli. I was, they were adding on to the school. And I happened to run into my high school coach, and was chatting. And he's like, hey, what are you up to? And stuff. So it was, just started off as a casual conversation. And then he said, hey, I'm looking for someone else to help me coach. And he's like, are you interested? And I'm like, yeah. And so I really had no idea what, I was in my early 20s, so I'd been out of high school just a few years. And he's like, well, we practice at this time, stop by. And so I thought, well, I'll stop by, and like, I'll watch, or maybe, help out here or there. Mm-hmm. So we get there, and the guys warm up, and then he gives me a whistle, and he says, they're yours for the next 45 minutes. And I said, excuse me? And he goes, they're yours for the next 45 minutes. He goes, let's see what you can do. So it was kind of, sink or swim. And like, I had never coached. That was my first experience coaching. And so I kept him busy. So I'm like, okay, I just thought about what my coaches had done with me, in high school and college and stuff. And that was 23, 24 years ago, something like that. And so then I started taking coaching courses and learning. And it's funny because then once you start taking the coaching courses, you see things from a different perspective. And you're like, gosh, I wish I could have gone. I can go back to when I was 16, 17 with what I know now. I'm like, I'm so much, I thought I knew about the game, and I'm like, I really didn't. I'm like, but it's funny how that works. But that was how I got into coaching. So.
And did that coach kind of stick with you and as a mentor and help kind of guide you into like, hey, if you want to learn more, go into those coaching classes?
He did, because he told me about the NSCA because he had done some coaching courses, and he's like, this is what I did. He's like, I recommend, like if this is something that you want to do, for more than just a season, he goes, I would really recommend that you do your courses. So I did my regional course, and then I did my national and advanced national, and networking, and you get to watch other coaches. They may be doing something similar to you, but they have a different twist on it and stuff. And then, so him and I, we've kept in touch, and actually him and his wife, they came to our last regular season home game this year. So they came over from Indianapolis and was able, because they knew our kids from when they were little, but we've been in Ohio for about 9-10 years or so. And, now they're in high school and junior high. And so we got a picture with everybody, but it was really cool. Like, because I told the guys, I'm like, hey, my high school coach, my coach that I played for, and they're like, your high school coach? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, you still keep in touch with him? I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, we talk. I'm like, not all the time, but we'll, I call and see how he's doing, or if I'm down, we'll pop in and I'll have lunch with him or something. And they're like, how long you been out of school? And I'm like, a long time. And they're like, but so the kids kind of thought it was neat. The players thought it was neat that he was coming to the game and stuff. So yeah, I still keep in touch with him. So yeah.
I think that's one of the cool things, and I'm even recognizing it. I know it's early in my coaching career with Middletown, but the guys that I'm still texting, like after a game, they're texting me like at the college level, or I'm just checking in rain, or they're stopping by like on their fall break from college. So I think that's so cool. And you talked about kind of passing it forward, where like your dad kind of coached you and now you're getting to coach your sons. And it sounds almost cyclical, almost like in this coaching now, this coach that you looked up to and kind of took you under his wing, you're probably going to end up doing the same at the club level and here at Fenwick.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So and everybody asked me, like, when we, when our kids were little, they were like, what if your kids don't want to play soccer? And I'm like, soccer is my thing. I'm like, if they want to play soccer, great. But I'm like, if they're into something else, I'm like, that's great too. I'm like, I just wanted them, whatever they're involved in, whether it's sports or, band, or they're doing they're in plays. I'm like, I just wanted them to be involved in something. And I'm like, if they like soccer, I'm like, I'm not going to force it on them, but I'm like, if they want to play, then, then I'll share my, what I know, and I'll help them out. And then they've played since they were little, and they play basketball. My oldest son, he does soccer, and then he plays lacrosse in the spring, and our youngest son, soccer and basketball track. So they do all different sports and stuff. But like, we train together over two guys' turf field, because we don't live far from the high school. So we'll go over there in the summer, and they're like, Dad, can you do some keeper training? So because I was a center back when I played. Somehow both my kids are keepers. I don't know how that worked out. So they're like, can you do some keeper training with us? And so I'll go, and I'm like, well, I can do a little bit. I'm like, I didn't play keeper, but I'm like, I can do some stuff with you. So we go over there and, a few days a week and stuff. So we get in, it's just, hanging out and spending time together. And, they get to see you in a different light, because you're the coach and not their dad. And you get to share something that's been a big part of my life with them. So I think that's what the cool part about it is.
The cool thing that I've picked up on too is both that coaching job in Indy and then this Fenwick one came about by just random conversations or kind of networking. So how important is it kind of like getting to know other coaches or hopping on podcasts like this and sharing what's going on for you?
That's all. Yeah, I think it's huge, not just in the coaching profession, but just, just the work, whatever it is, if you're an engineer or a teacher or just networking with people. Because like, once I started doing my coaching courses, a good friend of mine, we met at the national course, Andy Brinkman, who he's coached all around. He coached at Wilmington College and Xavier, and was at Ohio State when they were national runners up. And he's coached, helped train the keepers. So him and I met, and we're still friends today. And when we moved from Indianapolis to Ohio, again, it was for my wife's job. I said, "Hey, Andy," I called him up. I'm like, "We're moving to this part of the, this is where we're going to live." And I'm like, "What schools are around there?" And he gave me a list of 3 or 4 schools. And he said, "I would only make one call." And I said, "Well, who?" I'm like, "Who would you call off this list?" And he said, "I would call Scott Morrissey at the University of Rio Grande." So Scott didn't know me at all. So I'm like, okay, I'm like, Andy knows, I trust Andy. And I called Scott and I told him, my situation. This was like in December, or yeah, it was in December. And I was like, well, we're moving in January. And he's like, okay. He's like, when you get here, he's like, call me again and we'll get you taken care of. So just from my relationship from Andy, I met Scott Morrissey and I went to, met with him and stuff. So I spent 6 years helping out with those guys. And then you get more relationships from that and stuff. And then actually from Andy, when he was at Wilmington College, Bud Lewis was a coach there who just retired a few years ago. When we moved to this area, then I was at Wilmington College. So again, it's all, networking and who you know. And, if you do a good job and people know you're a hard worker and, you put a lot, you care about the kids and you care about the craft of coaching, then they're gonna, hey, they'll put in a good call for you. So that's relationships are huge. That's what I try to tell my guys. I'm like, it's not like you have to know your stuff, but sometimes it's more who you know than what you know, or just being in the right place or at the right times. I'm like, sometimes it's just a random thing, and it's interesting how it works out. So
the thing too that I hear constantly from coaches is you randomly email Scott out of nowhere, and he's like, "Yeah, let's see what we can do to help you out." Like I hear it from multiple coaches all the time that we're always, because you sometimes you feel like everyone, like I'm trying to make my program better than everybody else's, but in the long run, like we're supporting all of the teams in our league when it comes to winning and getting to the league and guys getting all state and all league and all those types of things. The thing that's awesome too that I hear is, so you've experienced high school and the college level. What were some of the differences? Like what maybe at the college level you can maybe have to do a little bit more of versus maybe what you see here at the high school level?
I would say probably the biggest difference was just like the college game is more. I mean, all the kids are there. They're really, obviously, with your sons playing in college, they're all the kids on the roster. They were probably the better players, the best players on their high school roster. So you still spend, you're fine tuning the technical skills and things, and like you work on pattern of play, but it's more tactical, situational. If this happens and the team's doing this, we're going to counter. We're going to do this. So that in high school you do have some of that, but I think because not all the kids play. Because if you're at a small school, you got kids that do different sports, and in the winter they might be swimming or basketball or doing track or baseball in the spring. So they're not playing soccer all the time. And so once June, rolls back around and you're able to work with your guys again, I think at least my experience is like, I think it's more technical and trying to get those guys into just improving their soccer IQ and recognizing things in the game, which in college, I think, because it's just like, they're just more tactical, especially if they're a high level player. Because I remember when I was at Rio, we had an odd number and they were doing 4v2 and they're like, "Hey, can you hop in with this group?" And like, these guys are obviously way better than I was. And so they had, we had like a rectangle and we were moving between the cones, and you had the 2 guys in the middle, and the 3 players, like literally they were just juggling the ball in the air, and the ball never came to me. And I'm like, "Hey, thanks guys, I didn't make a mistake." I'm like, "You made me look good." So like the ball never hit the ground, because like they're like, "Hey, can you hop in?" I'm like, I don't know what I'm getting into here, but just but working with those guys and stuff. But I'd say the college game is more tactical, and you get to spend a lot more time. The season's longer and stuff, and so like you may they come in August, and depending on how you do in the postseason, you may be playing in November, sometimes that first week of December, which the high school season, I think it's just so so compressed, especially once you get into conference play, you're playing Tuesday, Thursday, maybe Saturday. And so now it's, if you're playing a Tuesday, Thursday, well, then Wednesday, you're not going to go heavy. You're going to maybe more of a recovery session. So you're really trying to keep guys healthy and things like that. So the college game, I think it's more spread out. You have more time to train and stuff. So I'd say that's probably some of the biggest differences.
And I completely agree. I think when I first got that first year, I put all these ideas like, oh, we'll do this formation, we'll do this. And then when I started running sessions, like, oh, that's the least of my worries. We need to just be able to connect some passes. And
yes, exactly.
Guys used to like the physicality and just dribbling and all of that. And it makes sense too. At the college level, the expectation would be you should be able to do some of these just basic soccer actions pretty solid from the get-go.
Yeah.
What was it like building relationships at the college level versus at the high school? Was it easier or was it a little bit different because of they're a little bit older and quote unquote more mature?
I think it was a little easier. Yeah, because they're older, and especially when I was at Rio, some of the guys, they're international guys, and even when I was at Wilmington, we had a lot of guys from Sweden that would come over. So they are a little older, a little bit more mature, and so just the conversations are different. You have the bus rides, especially if you're on a trip, you might be gone 3 or 4 days together. So you got the time on the bus and you guys are hanging out at the hotel and meals and stuff together, which, you get that a little bit at the high school level, but not, you got the pregame meals on game day and the bus ride, but you're not going from Ohio to New York or, any place like that. It's all within an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes at the most. So I would say, you just spend so much more time together. I would say that probably makes it easier to develop those relationships. And then, like you said, guys come back, and watch games and stuff like that. So it's like when everything got shut down, because when I went from high school, when I went from Roncalli, there was 3 kids that I coached in high school for all 4 years. All 3 of them committed to, it used to be Marian College, now it's Marian University. Well, all 3 of them committed to Marian. And I had played indoor with a guy that was head coach, Matt Nierengarten. Him and I had played indoor together, with each other and against each other. And he called me, and he knew me from obviously recruiting these 3 kids. And he goes, hey, you ever think about coaching college? And I'm like, well, I thought about it, but I'm like, that's about as far as it's gone. Cause I had coached high school for I think 6 years, 5-6 years, something like that. And him and his dad were the coaches. And he's like, we're looking for someone else. So I came up and met with him. I talked to him for a little bit, and while they offered me the job there, and then I'm like, yeah, I said, I'll take it. So then I talking, to these 3 kids, and I said, hey, I'm gonna be your coach for 4 more years. They're like, no, they're like, we graduated. And I'm like, and I told them, and then so I coached these guys for 8 years, and we're still friends today. So one of them is a doctor, one's a detective, and the other one's like an accountant and a real estate agent. So I still keep in touch with them and stuff. And so when those guys were married, and then you get all the different kid, I had those 3 guys and other guys. And so I spent 7 years at Marion. And so when the when COVID first happened, we would get together online, and so they texted me one night and they're like, hey, coach, do you have this app called House Party? And I'm like, no, I have no idea. They're like, download it. So I get on there, and then so it became a weekly thing. Like every Saturday, we would get on and we would talk for 2 or 3 hours. And every week there was more and more people. So as Matt would get on there and different players that we had. So there was 2 guys from Canada, and we had a guy from Tanzania. So just a random call, because I played indoor with Matt. And so I coached these guys for us. So I've known them since they were 13, 14 years old. And now they're married, and they have obviously their own careers, and they're married with kids and stuff. And I'm like when I look at them, I'm like, man, I still see them as 13, 14-year-old kids. I know they're not, but it's just, you spend all those time together. And so I actually, when I interviewed for Fenwick, they asked me that. So Mike asked me, he said, do you still keep in touch with any of your players? I'm like, oh yeah. And so he's like, well, can we call them? So I gave him, these Tony and Justin and Greg. I said, these are the guys that I coach in high school and I coach in college. I'm like, you can call them. So he called them, and I'm like, hey, this guy's going to call you. And they're like, well, we'll just tell them the truth. They're like, you treated us well, and we enjoyed playing for you. So I'm like, again, it's just relationships, so.
that was the word relationship just keeps popping up in my head because it's so cool. One, just how things just kind of get put in line. Some guys, when I talk to them, they're like, yeah, my plan was when I graduated high school, I was going to go coach this, and, they kind of have a plan. And yours feels kind of like I'm just kind of getting taken different ways. And then I'm making the most of the experience, which I think is awesome, even just for your players to hear, like, look, you don't have to have it all figured out. I think a lot of times with our kids, especially, like, hear it in school all the time, like, hey, what are you going to do when you go to college? What are you going to do? Like, I remember when I was 17, I was a goofball. I had no clue what I was going to be.
I didn't either.
and here we are having a podcast. So I think it's cool that not that you've not had an idea of what you wanted, but I think it's been cool that you've been open to opportunities and that you've gone after them, and that's opened up all these doors for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like I always tell people, I'm like, things happen for a reason. I'm like, you don't always know. Maybe at the time you don't understand, but then maybe 6 months or a year, you're like, oh my, you're like, if this wouldn't happen, this doesn't happen, and you're like, then look what came from these opportunities and the people that you met and things you got to do. So I never thought I would be in education. I didn't, like, when I was 16, 17, I didn't think I was going to coach. I'm like, oh, probably like every kid, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna play in college and I'll play in the pros. And obviously, you find out real quick, okay, well, that's not going to happen. Because when I played, I always tell the kids, ask me, they asked me what type of player I was. I said, guys, I said, there's piano players and piano carriers. I said, I was a piano carrier. I'm like, I said, I knew what I could do, what I couldn't do. And I said, I didn't try to fool myself. And I'm like, I'm like, I knew what I could do. And I took pride in that. I'm like, I said, I was just going to outwork who I played against, because I played center back. I said I would win the ball, and I knew which guys to get it to. And then I said, then I let them do their thing. So, like, everybody's got their role on the team, and I'm like, that was mine. So,
which I think is cool for them too, because you see they focus so much on the Messis and Ronaldos and and all the superstars, and you don't realize for all those superstars, there's 5-6 other guys around them that are just doing their role. They're being that, like, you. So I'm going to win the ball, and I'm going to get it to the guy who then can make the decisions after that. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to help the keeper that's behind me, type of thing, which I think is cool for them to hear. Like, and I'm sure you preach to your kids all the time, like, hey, you have a certain spot for us on the field. You have a responsibility. Not everyone has the same expectations when they're out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they're like that was in, like, I remember my last year at Rio, we had, we were such a deep team, and because we had guys from we had some kids from Ohio, and we had guys from Europe, and we had guys from South America and different places, but they all knew their roles, and, like, there was no egos on the team, and these are high level players and stuff. And, like, just like you were saying, this guy, hey, this is my job. This guy, my job is to score goals. This guy, is to set people up. And it was fun to watch, and we had a really, really good season that season. I mean, all the seasons I was there, we had good years, but that one was really special. So just watching those guys, they were like, everybody bought into the process, and it just makes your job that much easier. So,
is it more difficult at the high school level because you can't kind of handpick your kids? So, when you're at Rio, we can get 2 or 3 strikers, and we can get the mids, and we can get our backs how we want them. Do you find, is that one of the difficult things, is finding guys that kind of fit? Or do you, I guess, when, like I said, when I started, I was like, oh, we're going to do this kind of, these will be the principles. And then when I figured out, I'm like, no, that doesn't fit my clientele. That's not how the boys can play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I mean, like, you have your favorite system. We like to play a 4-3-3, or sometimes we'll switch to a 4-4-2. But I'm like, you have to look at your players. All right, hey, where's our strength? Okay, we're really strong in the midfield, or we've got multiple guys who can score. So I think, obviously you can't pick your players in high school. So these are the kids that come out. You've got your 35, 40 guys, and then it's figuring out the best combination. That players, all right, so maybe with this guy with this club team, he plays center mid, but maybe for us we need him to play center back, or just different things like that. And that's what we tell the kids. We're like, we may ask you to play a different spot, and if we ask you, it's because we know we have faith that you can play that position. And I'm like, you got to train. I'm like, not everybody's going to start. I'm like, but everybody has to train like they were a starter, because I'm like, each game is different. Maybe somebody gets injured or somebody's having an off night. And I'm like, when we call your number, you got to be ready to go. And you're like, you can't, oh my God, oh, I didn't think I was going to play that. And I'm like, you have to come to every training session and every game expecting that, you know, hey, I'm trained like I'm a starter and I'm going to get in. So when we call your number, you're ready. And I think this year that was really a big thing, because we had more, our numbers were up this year from last year, because we had, I think, 39, 40 guys. And like last year we had 31 or 32. And so, you know, we got guys playing JV and varsity both, just to make, you know, make numbers work and stuff. And this year we had a few swing players, but we had guys, a lot of guys were just, these guys are JV and these guys are varsity. And I think that helped out too. And when, like, I had a big senior class this year. We had 13 seniors this year. So we got a lot of shoes to fill next year, because 6 of them were starters. But those guys were really, really good. We're going to miss them next year. But yeah, like you said, I think you have to know your players and what their strengths are. And okay, well, I want to play a 4-3-3, but maybe we're better playing a 4-5-1. And then I think you just adapt to what, you know, what your players' strengths are, or what they're going to be most successful at.
And that would all go back to the relationship idea you've been talking about. Like, the more you get to know these guys and kind of see how they work, and you get those conversations with them, if they're not comfortable in a spot, you're going to get that feedback from them as well. The other thing I wanted to touch on, special education, that takes us, like, no pun intended, but a special person to do that. How has that, like, one, impacted you as a person? And then 2, how has that translated to you when it comes to coaching high school teenagers?
I think the biggest thing is each day is different. Like, you never know, because the kids, they've got their own stuff going on, and, you know, they're high school kids. And so some of the kids I work with, they're, you know, some of them, they have different levels of autism, and so, you know, whatever their learning disability is. And I like to, hey, these kids, they're not, you know, they don't have a learning disability. They just learn in a different way. And some days they need a lot of help, and other days they're like, hey, I got this. So I'm always, because I'm with a different teacher each period. So like, I'm in a couple of history classes, I'm in an art class, I'm in an English class, and I'm in a science class, you know. So different teachers, different kids. And so it's just, some days are really good, and then some days, you know, the curveball gets thrown your way. Maybe, you know, whatever the kid has, something happened to the kid, and now he's checked out. So now, hey, can I get this kid to check back in? And hey, let's get done what we need to get done. And so it's each day. So I think you have to be very flexible, and you just, hey, okay, well, I thought we were going to do this, and maybe that works out that day, but like I said, you know, something happens and the kids aren't into it, and they have to know why they're doing it. So I'm like, okay, hey, maybe you don't like this class, but you need this class to graduate, and this is what you need to do. And I said, I always tell them, I said, I'll help you. I said, I'm not going to do the work for you, but I'm like, as long as you're willing to put in the work, I'll do what I can to help you. And so they're like, oh, okay. And then again, back to relationships, because like, there's kids that I've worked with, because I mainly work with sophomores. Sometimes I have a few juniors, but now the kids that are seniors, and they've seen me in the hallway and they give you a fist bump. Hey, Mr. Bray, what's going on? And, you know, if they play soccer, then we talk about soccer. Because the way I got started at Lakota West was subbing, because my degree's in physical education and health. I did that, and then my wife and I were both teaching. And once we had Luke, daycare is expensive, and she said, hey, if you stay home and take care of the kids, I'll go back to engineering. That way we don't have to pay for daycare. So for like 5 years, that's when I did. I was with the kids during the day, then I would go coach in the evening and stuff. And then, so anyways, long story short, I got into West, like I was subbing, and they needed somebody to help with the ESL kids, like they do their proficiency testing. So the teacher is in the building, but she's giving them their test. So the kids are still in the classroom. She would have the lesson plans, and I would come in, and she's like, this is what I need you to do today. And, you know, you have kids from all different countries, you know, you have Hispanic kids and kids from Asia and kids from Africa and different places. And so I'm like, I got to find something that I can connect with these kids with. And then, so they find out that you know about soccer, and then then it just clicked. And so the teacher's just like, how'd you get these guys? I'm like, we were talking about Messi, or we're talking about whatever. And she's like, who is that? And I'm like, and then so they're like, hey, Mr. Bray, did you watch it? So we thought, we spent the first few minutes of class talking about the game, and then I'm like, all right, guys, we got to get to work. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door, and then so I went from that and the special ed, which I never thought I would be a, in special education, but it's fun. Every day is something different. So.
And again, it's one of those where someone just said, "Hey, would you want to help out?" And then it just kind of blows up, becomes what it is. I think it's so cool. The other thing is props to you for taking the time to like spend time at home so your wife can go to work. I think that speaks volumes as well, because I know the boys, your kids recognize the time they got to spend with you then, and now it's like see at the beginning, and now here you are at the end when they're becoming a little bit more independent and what have you. And I can tell family is really important, like moving back here a little bit closer to family and all that type of stuff. And I can see it kind of builds throughout even just your program in terms of coaching. What have you.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Like that's what we always tell the kids, is that I know everybody says we're family, or we're brothers, but you can say that, but if the kids don't believe it, then they're not going to buy in. And so I think last year, just like I said, with the challenges from COVID and not being able to spend time together off the field, and like this year we were able to do that. And then the kids, they get to see a different side of you, away from the field, and you can chat with them, and you're playing euchre, or you're playing cornhole, or whatever it is, and you can goof around with the kids and talk a little smack to them while you're playing those activities and stuff. And like they're like, "Coach, we didn't think you're," and I'm like, "Hey, I'm playing to win." And they're like, "It's euchre." And I'm like, "I don't care." I'm like, "If I'm playing, I want to win this game." And so and then they're like, "Well, can we talk smack?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can talk smack back to me." So like they're like, "Okay," just and it's funny stuff, what they come up with. But just again, I think the closer you are as a team, the better the better your team will play, and the more successful they have a chance of being.
So I'm going to ask this question, and it's probably like, I'm not sure, but is there any plans like long term? Are you thinking Fenwick's my stop and I'm going to be here for a while? At least I'm sure, to see maybe your boys go through. But is there any part of you that's like, I'd love to go back to college and maybe be the head role, or is this kind of like or could it be just a random email or a call that kind of pulls you in another direction?
I would like to be at Fenwick for a while. I'd like to build that program up, because there's so many talented kids, but it has its challenges. It's a small school and different things like that. But I think it could be something really special. And so me and Pat and Caesar and Chris, the guys that are on our coaching staff, we've all, bought in, and we all want to, get this program to where we think it could be. So I would like to be here for a long time. You never know, but like if I had my say, I would say like this is probably where I would like to say Fenwick's my last coaching stop. So,
how important was it to get those other guys onto your staff?
Pat. So Pat, he was there. He was the assistant before I was there. So he's kind of been that link, because he knows how things work at Fenwick. And then so he originally wasn't going to stay on, and because his last year his son was a senior, Dylan Wiseman, who played the six for us. And so everybody thought, well, he's going to stay, because Dylan's a senior, and then he'll probably move on. Well, now Dylan's not there, and his other son goes to Lakota East. But he cares about the kids at Fenwick. He's like, I've been here 4 or 5 years. He's like, I've gotten to know these kids, and I've invested a lot of time. And so he's been huge, because like I said, he was a Fenwick before we got there, before Caesar and Chris and myself got there. So he's kind of that link between, the way they used to do things and the way we want to do things now. So he's been really instrumental. And then our goalkeeper coach, again, relationships. When I coached at Wilmington, he was our goalkeeper at Wilmington. And so this is his first time. Last year was his first time coaching. And so I called him up, and I'm like, "Hey, I just got hired, at Fenwick." And I'm like, "It doesn't pay a lot, but I'm like, it's an opportunity to coach, if that's something that you're interested." He's like, "Yeah," "I'd like to get into that." So that's how we got Chris. And then Caesar, he works at Lakota West, because last year was his first year of coaching as well. So him and I, because he worked at Lakota West, and he would work with the ESL kids. And so we would talk soccer all the time. And then when I think it was 2019 when the Lakota West girls won state. Him and I were at the game and we were watching the game. And him and I would see the same. I'm like, man, they should have played here, or they should have done this. And he would say the same thing. So like we see the game the same way. And then so when I got hired, Mike was like, "Do you have a coaching staff in mind?" I'm like, "Well, I got a couple guys." So I called Caesar and I'm like, "Hey, would you want to be our JV coach?" And he's like, because he's like he's in his early 50s and he's like, "I've never coached before." And he goes, "Why?" He goes, "You think I can do it?" I'm like, "Caesar, I wouldn't ask you if I didn't think you can do it." And so he came on, and so last year was kind of a learning experience for him because he's from El Salvador, but he grew up in the Baltimore and DC area, and he would play in men's leagues and stuff. So he would watch Pele and these different guys when they were over here towards the end of their careers. He got to watch those guys play in person, but he would play in the men's league. Like as a high school kid, he was playing with older guys, and so he knows how the game should be played and little tricks of the trade. So when he was coaching, he was still like he was playing because everything was in Spanish, and he's like, "Oh, I've got to train, English." But now the kids love him. Like they're like, because if he's like, because he switched to a different school. He's with the elementary kids now, so he gets out later. They're like, "Hey, is Coach Caesar coming today?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then sometimes if he's not there, because if he's translating an IEP meeting, I'm like, he's got to do this meeting. So Caesar's not coming. And they're like, "Was he going to be here tomorrow?" And I'm like, "He'll be here tomorrow." So like they just, so they love him. So like it's just fun. But again, really the only one I didn't have a relationship with was Pat. So I coached Chris and I worked with Caesar, but now I don't think there's three other guys that I would rather coach with besides those three. So
I think again, I know it keeps kind of going back to it, but it was another opportunity. You reached out even for your man that said, "Look, I've never coached before." And you're like,
yeah.
"No, I was in the same boat as you."
Yeah.
And that's how I got to where I am now.
Yeah.
And I think being a little bit smaller allows you to, those moments when Caesar can't make it because he's got other obligations, then you've got enough guys between you and the other guys to say, "Okay, we've got it. We'll run whatever we do session wise."
Exactly.
And I think it's another example where like you said, it's one thing to say family, but it's one to actually do it and to understand that people have, and you talked about even with your special ed kids, you don't know sometimes what people are bringing to school or bringing to the pitch or bringing. So if he's got stuff he's got to deal with, I, as the head coach, have to understand he's going to have to deal with that stuff. And then I'm going to step up and control what I can control.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, it's a good dynamic because we can bounce ideas off of each other. And the biggest thing, like when I was an assistant for other coaches, like I found out, like they don't always want you, like they don't want you to agree with them. Like you may have a different opinion. They want to see, hey, well, you voice your opinion and maybe they agree with you. Sometimes they don't, but they don't. And so like with all three of these guys, I'm like, "Hey, what do you guys think about this?" And maybe one of them feels the same way, but the two other guys, they may have two completely different thoughts or opinions on it. So that makes it good. I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, I didn't think about it this way." So I'm like, that's why I like having those guys around, because they see things maybe the same way. Sometimes we see things the same way, but sometimes they're looking at it from a different perspective, which is good.
The one common denominator too through all of this would be your wife. What's it been like having her as a support for you when you come home from like those long days or those long away games and whatnot?
It's good. So I mean, when we first started dating, that's like I was coaching before we started dating, and then because I was coaching high school, and then so she got to know the players as well. So like we still get together occasionally. If we're over in Indianapolis, we'll go out to eat or whatever. And so the players have the parents, and they're like, "Oh, it's Sean and Amy," and they and like when we were married, we would have cookouts after the game. So the parents, they would grill hot dogs and hamburgers, and so we would play, and then we'd spend another hour and a half by the field after the game, just kind of tailgating after the game. And so like it's not easy. Like your wife knows, obviously, in season you're gone a lot, you spend a lot of time. So she knows, especially if we have an away game, like if it's high school or club or whatever, or college, and she's like, "Hey, how'd the game go?" And I'm like, she knows by my answer, "Oh, okay, he doesn't want to talk about it right now, or the game didn't go so well." So she kind of picks up on my body language or how I respond to things, but she's really good. So it's sometimes not always fair to the spouses of the coaches because we're gone a lot and like they have to do stuff with the kids or they're helping with homework, whatever. And sometimes you get home and everybody's in bed when you get home and stuff. So, but she's really good. And like, I don't think I could do this without her. So.
Sean, this has been so awesome. Chat just kind of gets a glimpse into kind of the coaching journey that you've been on. If people want to follow you or connect with you and follow up with Fenwick Soccer, what are some easy ways for them to?
So me, it's at Sean Thomas Bray, SEAN THOMASBRAY on Twitter, and then our Fenwick account is Fenwick Football FUTBOL. So yeah, so anytime they want to connect and ask questions or whatever, so like I'm more than willing to help out, or if I can help them out, or they have whatever. So yeah, so. I mean, I want to come out and watch a game. They come out and watch a game. We always need we need all the support we can get. So,
man, I was going to say too, with all of clearly you've got connections at multiple levels and all over the place. So if people have questions or are in a certain place and they're like, hey, I need to find out who, kind of like how you reached out to your buddy Andy and said, hey, here's where I'm going to be at. Who can I touch base with? So I think you'd be a great resource.
Yeah, especially the kids down in South, because obviously you've connected with Tyler Wickham, so those guys in Southeast Ohio, Tyler and Zach Breath and those guys, that was another big part, of kind of me developing as a coach. So yeah, so I'm like, I've worked with big clubs, small clubs, the kids from the big city kids, little kids that are in rural areas of the state. So players are players. There's good players everywhere, and there's good coaches everywhere, and it's really, really neat just to connect with those coaches and like watch their sessions and see how they do things and pick their brains a little bit. So yeah.
And I'll just add in, so Middletown, where I coach, and Fenwick are literally 10 minutes away from each other. And we have played each other the last 2 years. He got the better of us this year, and I think we had a tie last year. But it's always fun to play them and what have you. So and Sean lives here in Middletown, which is another bonus. So I think this might be the first of many little conversations I'll be having with Sean to pick his brain and what have you. But I really appreciate you hopping on with the podcast with me tonight.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked me. I was, like I said, this is the first time I've ever done this, and so it was fun. So yeah, I look forward to more conversations with you.
Awesome. Hey, I'll shut this thing down. This is Kieran with Coach's Corner Chats with Sean Bray, and I'm out. Peace.